Today, I am super happy to have Kevin Tomlinson with me, who is a theatre maker and co-founder of Kepow Theatre Company. So first came to Kevin's work through taking a couple of his really super fun and practical workshops and also seeing live improv Kepow shows, which are a true delight. But Kevin, that was quite a while ago, and you are a very creative, very productive person. So what else would you like people to know about you and your work as it relates to comedy?
Oh gosh, I suppose I suppose I fell into comedy by accident because, well, like a lot of people, I like doing straight acting as well. But 9 times out of 10, when I was on stage just acting, kind of in straight plays, people would end up laughing, which isn't great if you're doing Hamlet or something. Not that I ever got to play Hamlet, but at school I often got cast in the funny roles, not through any just because people found me funny. I suppose it's because I'm short and I got bullied a lot at school, and so you learn to be a bit goofy to kind of try and
Mm.
avoid getting punched. And so, um, yeah, I kind of fell into it by accident, really. But also, it's immense fun, isn't it, to hear the audience laugh? You get the instant gratification. So, um, but in recent years, I've sort of spent 50% of the time doing non-comic work. So I've
Mm.
just finished a very dark psychological thriller in London, directing it and appearing in that, and I was getting a thrill from how quiet can you make the audience? Can you
Mm.
can you create work that's so good that nobody wants to move or rustle? And I was getting a real thrill and kick from that, so which was nice. But I'm so ready to go back to comedy after a month of that because it is lovely to just hear people laughing and just giving them a good time, especially in these crazy times with Ukraine, Russia, and post lockdown. I'm still feeling the effects of that, even though it's been a while now since the lockdown. I still feel many people are like suffering from slight post traumatic stress from it. We were so bombarded with hideous death counts every day and images, and reports coming out now that the government were worried that we were being too blasé in this country, and lots of internal memos between government officials and saying people are not taking this seriously enough. We've got to emotionally get them more emotionally engaged by basically scaring them into lockdown. And so I think they did a bit overkill with the bombarding of images and messages. And I do worry about the mental health of everyone. I was going to say young
Mm.
people of today, but everyone, what effect that had on us. And so I want to create theatre that combats the sense of loneliness or fear that was
Mm.
induced by lockdown. So yeah, blimey, it's gone very heavy very quickly.
Well, no, and the thing is, on this show, people who've listened to it before will know that although there's a lens on comedy, I particularly love comedy that draws in so many more emotions. And lots of people who've been on the show actually are interested in the whole spectrum, but that comedy plays, a part in that
Mm.
rather than something that's just all about the gags. So I love that. And for example, your Seven Ages show, I
Mm.
think is super interesting for the way that it brings in like the scope of a life. Again, we're getting really big and heavy straight away. But it's also so fun. So when I've seen clips of it online, obviously the camera's pointed at you in the stage, but the audience is laughing uproariously. And yet
Mm.
there's also really incredibly poignant scenes. So I wonder actually if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that show and the role that kind of improv played in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Those clips on YouTube are funny because they're from like 9 or 10 years ago now. But some
Mm.
people actually said to me, "Oh, you've got canned laughter because
Oh
nobody
no.
laughs that loudly." And I'm like, "No, genuinely, that we have not enhanced the laughter at all. It can induce a big laughs, but we're not always trying to make them laugh because the show is 2 hours long and it looks at the 7 ages of life, starting with a baby and all the way through to me playing an old man at the end. And I have a range of masks to help me play different characters at different stages of life. And it's based on that Shakespeare idea of the 7 ages. And yeah, towards the into the second half, I try to go for pathos as well as humor and really explore, the fragility of life and how lucky we are to be alive and what are we passing on to our future generations, and really get people to think about bigger questions. Because I think it's great just to make people laugh for the sake of laughing, and that's really therapeutic. But I love it when if you can somehow make the world a slightly better place, not just through making people happy in the room there and then, and the chemicals that induces and the sense of togetherness, and that's valid in itself, but I also like the idea that just maybe making people think about society and how we interact with each other and how we can be slightly better human beings. And I say that for myself as much as anyone else. You know, we've all made huge mistakes. I know I have throughout my life, and what you can do is try and strive to be a little bit better than you were previously, or at least that's my goal. But anyway, yes, so Seven Ages is a celebration of life. I want it to, first of all, be fundamentally enjoyable for everyone, and then secondly, make them think and maybe make the world a better place. Big, noble goal. And some people say that's just ridiculous. You can't do that with theatre, but it's good to have ideals, good to strive towards that. And yeah, it came about. I used to work in scripted theatre when I first left. I did a drama degree at Hull University, and I wrote some plays, and I was a playwright, and I won the Sunday Times Playwright Award. And so I went down the writing route, and I got a job as a writer in residence at the Theatre Royal in Northampton for a year and a half, and was writing plays for them, and some of it was going around schools, theatre and education and what have you. And then I worked with Keith Johnstone, just because I was working as an actor as well as a writer. I got my equity card at the Rep in Northampton. So I was working as an actor and writer in traditional theatre. And I thought I'll do some training with Keith Johnstone because I'd read his book and thought it was great. And he wrote this great book called Improv. And I'd also trained with Philippe Gaulier and Desmond Jones and all that physical theatre. And I'd worked with Tressel and John Wright at Middlesex, at the acting course at Middlesex, with John Wright. And so I've done the physical theatre. But anyway, Keith Johnstone, I was really interested in that. And I thought, it'd make me a better actor and writer. And then I went to Canada and trained with him and saw his company get up on stage with no script, and they improvised the whole show for 2 hours. And I was just blown away. And it was incredibly funny and moving, and they didn't swear, and they weren't rude. And I'd only really seen British improv, which tended to be a little bit on the rude side and scatological. And they were telling really good stories that were really funny. And so I was like, I want to do that. And I tried and joined in, and I was rubbish. And so I was like, okay, now I've got a goal to try and get good at what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because at the time I was about 26, 27, and I could see these 18, 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds who'd been training with Keith since they were 13, and they were amazing. And I actually thought, I've missed the boat. I'm too old. I'm like, I should have started when I was a teenager, which is ridiculous now that I'm 50 and I look back and I'm like, oh, what was it? So anyway, I came back to England and had my theatre company, Kepow, and we were scheduled to do a scripted play. And I wrote to the Arts Council and said, can I make 50% of it improvised? And the Arts Council said, yes, you can change the remit. Amazingly. So instead of doing a fully scripted play, I did a 50% scripted and took it to Edinburgh, and it did well. And off the back of that, a producer in New Zealand saw it and said, do you want to tour New Zealand? I'll pay your flight and accommodation and a fee, but I'll take all the ticket sales. And I was like, well, if I'm getting the flight and accommodation and a fee, then yeah, go for it. So I toured around New Zealand for a month performing. And then it just took off from there back in the UK. I just started touring around UK, and then other countries invited me out. And that was in 2003, I think. So 20 years ago. So yeah. So it took me 3 years to get going, from the age of 27 training with Keith to finally creating my own show, and then it going to Edinburgh a couple of years in a row, actually. Yeah, for the last 20 years I've been mostly doing improvised comedy. But then the last 4 or 5 years I've been drifting more back to traditional theatre and scripted theatre. But then it's quite fun because my wife runs a theatre company that does straight theatre, scripted, very dark, and then my company does comedy. So I employ her to do the comedy shows with me, and then she employs me to direct and act in her very dark psychological thrillers. It's actually kind of like yin and yang. It's quite healthy psychologically, emotionally, I think, for both of us.
Perfect. I love it. What a perfect marriage. Yeah, that is. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. And this is not an easy question because obviously we progress in stages and sometimes it's hard to see what those things are. But when you try and think back to you, who was that person who was in Keith's workshop and you were saying like you felt a bit rubbish, what were some of the pieces that you think you were missing at the time that you just couldn't have known?
I think the main thing was the comedy or the improv I'd done in the UK was very much just high octane, high energy, be fast, don't censor, just say the first thing that comes into your head. It doesn't matter how rude or naughty or wacky, just do anything to get a laugh, an instinct, like a sugar hit. And then Keith said, slow down, calm down, don't be afraid of being boring, just be ordinary, be average, think of the story arc, try and lure the audience into a stable world before you rock it. And so it took a long time for me to just calm down and not feel this, like, if they're not laughing every 5 seconds, I'm rubbish or failing, and going, it's fine if they don't laugh for several minutes, as long as you're getting them involved emotionally or intellectually or psychologically into the characters and the situation, and they're investing in it, then actually there might be some really huge laughs down the line if you get them drawn into your world. And to have the trust that the silence isn't that the audience are bored, it's just they're interested and you've not really done anything particularly funny yet, but that you can down the line make it funny. So that was the hugest, and it took time. It wasn't easy. I'd constantly try and panic and hit the panic button and drop the F-bomb or go rude, anything just to get a quick laugh. And Keith constantly was like slapping my wrist and like, and yeah, so it took a while. I didn't get it to begin with, because in Canada, it's brilliant. They have these 3 judges sitting in the front row in black robes and wigs. There's just 3 actors that they rotate. The actors rotate every show. So once in a while, you end up playing the judge. And they sit there with bicycle horns on string. And if you do something rude or gross on stage, they honk the bicycle horn and you have to leave the stage. And so I dropped the F-bomb and I got honked. And the audience laughed, but I had to exit the stage. And I was like, but they're laughing. Why are you getting rid of me? Surely I'm succeeding at comedy and improv. And then I got up on stage again, the next scene, and I F-bombed and I had to leave the scene halfway through. And it was frustrating. I didn't get it until I watched the Canadians be funnier than me without the need to F-bomb. And I was like, okay, how are they doing that? How are they staying so calm and not resorting to low common denominator ways of jerking a laugh out of the audience? They're doing it through character. They're doing it through narrative choices. They're doing it through great use of language. It was a real eye-opener. Reduced my ego back to like that. I thought it was quite good until I went there and I was like, oh no.
Yeah. Oh, but I love it, and that you stuck with it. And like you said, that was one of the reasons that I enjoyed the workshops that I took with you as well, because I'm very interested in story and character and world and narrative. And also, like, I started in theatre and devising, and I don't just, it's not my taste. I don't respond to the quick gags as an audience member or a performer. Some people love them, amazing. I don't. I like character, story, development, pacing, all the things you've mentioned. And I remember even at the time you like diagramming out structures that you were experimenting with, and I was like, oh, I've never seen anyone do this in improv. It's not, you're not just setting up a game and playing it. You're actually, to my mind on the whiteboard, like drawing out what I now sort of see as story arcs and different structures. And I really remember that about those workshops. I think it's super interesting.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it? But
it was, yeah.
Yeah, I was in rehearsals with a great actor called Chris John and Aliki Blythe, who's now at the National Theatre doing verbatim theatre, and Sophie Russell, who's now at the Globe doing Shakespeare. So that was quite a room to be in, just the 4 of us playing around in rehearsals and learning and trying stuff out. And yeah, we created a vocabulary of, you can structure different scenes in different ways. So it can start normal and then something positive happens and it gets better and better, and we'd call that a rocket. Or you could start a scene normal and something bad happens and it gets worse and worse, and we'd call that a slide. And then, and we came up with a whole range of other ones, so that we'd walk on stage and so that different scenes would have different structures. Otherwise, every scene is the trap to fall into, which Keith taught me, was most people go for instant conflict and then just try to make it as mad or as wacky or as conflict based as possible. And if you're trying to do a 2-hour show, that gets really boring. If you're doing 8 or 9 or 10 scenes and they've all got exactly the same structure, it gets really repetitive after a while. So that's why we came up with the different structures to keep an audience interested, because our shows are quite episodic. We tend to do 7 or 8 disconnected stories. So we need to give them different structures and rhythms. A bit like a variety show, like the old, and I suppose like Britain's Got Talent works on the same principle of, you have a dance show, it's followed by a solo singer, followed by acrobats, and it keeps you interested, the variety. And so my company's trying to do that within the format of improvising theatre.
I love that. And you've mentioned Keith Johnstone. Are there any other comedy creators or resources or inputs that you've had that you feel have really been pivotal to your development? So obviously you've had such an amazing career.
Wow, thank you. It's very kind of you. I loved, when I was little, I loved like Harold Lloyd and Charlie Chaplin and Laurel and Hardy. I couldn't get Buster Keaton slightly later, and couldn't get enough of them. Just learned tons by watching them. And then when I started doing it at drama school, John Wright at Middlesex University was brilliant at teaching me how to free up and be very creative. That was so useful training with him. I followed him. I was his assistant for about 2-3 years, and I sort of traveled around the world with him, being his assistant, working on different projects. And so he was very useful, beneficial. Obviously Keith, massive. And then I'd just read a lot. So I remember reading Ken Dodd's autobiography, and just watching. I mean, even when I was growing up, even like Heidi High, Hello, Dad's Army. Like, I loved all that. That you can, because I'm learning all the time and watching, and then going to the theatre and watching Eightborn and John Godber in the 90s, and then obviously more up to date Ricky Gervais in the early 2000s, and I don't know. I think if you've got an interest in comedy, and then there was a time when I was going to the Edinburgh Festival every year and performing, and I would just use every spare hour to go watch other people perform and just admire different people's skills, and then try and learn. And also, like, if things aren't working, go, why is that not connecting with me or the people around me, and trying to analyze it. That's what Keith was really good at, is really helping anyone who worked with him analyze it. And he gave us a vocabulary as well of, it's because they sidetracked, or they cancelled, or that's funny because they reincorporated or called something back, or that's because it's a taboo topic. I don't know, it's just fascinating the way he they wimped, so that's not very funny. They were really specific, so that was funny. And just different words like wimp, bridge, hedge, all this terminology he comes up with, which people can read in Keith Johnstone's books, like Improv and Improv for Storytellers. I always recommend those two books, are pretty much above any other book on creativity and comedy. And then there's Truth in Comedy by Del Close. It's worth a read.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, Truth in Comedy, Del Close. He set up improv in America in a format called the Harold, which is very big in America. The sad thing is, in the improv world, you get people that, I'm a Keith Johnstonian, or I'm a Del Close, and then they almost like, it's almost like religions, isn't it? And then you get the People's Front of Judea, the all the rest, the way the Monty Python ridiculed how religions just fracture and fracture and fracture, and it's something starting to happen in the improv world a bit. There's these little cliques, and it's silly, really, because we're all just trying to be creative. And
and I personally, like, my own learning philosophy is to learn from like everything possible. That's why with this podcast, it's anyone who's making comedy in any form, whether it's to do with memoir or linguistics or film or live theatre, because there's so much to be learned, I think, from other forms. And I don't particularly like things when they really I mean, it can be useful to have that philosophy, like where I trained, you trained at Gaulier, I trained at Lecoq, and people would joke that they were kind of rivals because they were both in France. It's like, that's just silly. They're both two brilliant people forming schools, and there's so much to be learned from everyone. So I love that you have that approach where you've kind of just watch and learn from everyone.
I remember John Wright saying, like, you can go to one school and just do Meisner, or just do Gaulier, or just do. But I remember John Wright saying it's better to have a patchwork quilt of training, and I like. So I'm a big fan of just borrowing from different schools of thought, and
that made sense. And that's great that you're saying about their language that's around analysis. So I did want to ask you about feedback, because you also have this perspective of being a dramaturg and a director as well. What have you learned about giving feedback for watching other people's work, for when it's working, when it's not working? Because it's a whole skill set in itself, and it can be really hard to do effectively.
Gosh, that's quite a deep question.
I know. It's quite...
One thing Keith taught me is, like, don't overdwell on the negatives, because if something's not working, it will drop away anyway. So focus on the positives. Sometimes though, with comedy, definitely I've learned that if something's working, try not to point it out to the actors or analyze it, or go, it's funny because of this, or it's really good when you do that. That's almost, I found, just guaranteed to mess them up, because then they step outside themselves and they become aware, or they try and fix it. And yeah, so if something's going well, I try not to even mention it because I just want them to just keep doing what they're doing if I'm directing a show. So 90% of my notes tend to be constructive criticism, which I know sometimes, but then you have to be aware that actors, we're all deeply in need of support and encouragement and confidence as well. So it's the classic thing, isn't it? I have to remember now. I think that phrase, a shit sandwich, can be quite useful. So start off with, if giving notes after a show, point out some positive things. Then they go, okay, the director's happy, I did a good job. Then say, even better if maybe this or maybe that. And then to not leave them with a crappy feeling, end with something positive as well. So positive, negative, positive. I tend to do that in workshops as well when I'm teaching. It's positive, negative, because then people are more open to the negative criticism or the constructive criticism in the middle if you've pointed out some good things either side of that. People's, confidence and egos and it's quite naturally fragile. I mean, I have huge admiration for anyone who gets up in a workshop, let alone in front of a paying audience. And maybe that's because I still perform as well. I know what it's like. So I'm very aware of acting is a lot about confidence and comedy is a lot about confidence. So I don't want to do anything that's going to damage that and undermine the people I'm trying to help.
Yeah.
So,
that's
kind of like,
not everyone has that approach. Some people
No,
definitely,
I've
some of the
worked
people I trained with feel like the opposite, but
Well,
I'm
yeah,
more
and
on your side. Yeah.
Well, like when I trained with Gaulier, I mean, I must admit, I did find him funny, and like he was brutal. I mean, he very rarely praised, and regularly people would end up crying in his lessons. And normally on any course, I mean, I did about a year's training with him, but he did them in modules. So he did like neutral mask, and then clown, and play, and melodrama. Every course, 2 or 3 people dropped out, having cried several days in a row. But then, whenever he was rude about me, or maybe it's because I've done a lot of sport, a lot of rugby and football and cricket. So I've been used to sports coaches in the 80s and 90s being quite brutal and, like the Brian Clough, Nottingham Forest manager, quite just direct. Just if you're rubbish, you're told you're rubbish. So it didn't bother me that he was quite rude. I mean, was he rude, or was he just being really honest and wasn't sugarcoating it? And I just think it's a gift. And I mean, it's an offer. He's offering you. If he's telling you you're rubbish, then at least he's honest. And so,
yeah.
And then hopefully you can get. And I think he's trying to destroy any ego, and he's trying to make you vulnerable, and he's trying to. So it didn't bother me, but I'm not a huge fan of the old drama school philosophy of knock them down and destroy them and then build them up again. That kind of old school drama acting training, I'm not a big fan of either. I think that's a bit outdated now, and I've seen a lot of actors come out of drama school and they're just damaged by it because they tend not to be rebuilt in time for when they graduate, and so that's not too clever either.
No, I agree, and I'm just all for the more people being able to do things that they enjoy creatively, the better. So I don't really like any snobbery around things. Any things, like you say, if people are coming to training, they're there because they want to get better. But in general, I'm just not a fan of shutting down people's creativity. So it's that balance.
And to give Gaulier credit, he said a lot of the time he'd emphasize pleasure, and you've got to be having fun on stage. You've got to be having fun with your fellow colleagues. And so often his bluntness was with a little twinkle in the eye as well.
Yeah.
So, and I think that sense of having pleasure in being creative is so important, isn't it? I think that's definitely, Keith was a big fan of that as well. The more fun you're having, the more that releases your creativity, I think, on average.
And are you able to bring that to your work when you're writing as well? Because you said that you started in writing. What's that process like for you compared to being in a room working with others sort of up on your feet?
Writing's different, isn't it? I mean, yeah, I used to really find writing hard. It was kind of like I don't know, everyone, I felt like I'm sure a lot of writers like this, I felt just this strong urge to, I just had to write. But it was often like a bit like, sometimes it was fun, but sometimes it was like vomiting. Like you feel better afterwards, but it was quite hard at the time. Then other times you get in a flow and you're like, but then sometimes you'd read stuff back the next day and you'd be like, that's rubbish. And so and then lack of sleep, because sometimes I'd be writing at 2, 3 in the morning. I'd got most of my ideas at night time, so that's not too clever in the long run, because then you're getting really tired as well. So I found writing tortuous. And strangely, winning the Sunday Times Playwriting Award when I was 19, then I put pressure on myself that everything had to be as good as what I'd just written. And I remember getting my first negative review, having had loads of positive reviews and this lovely award, going to Edinburgh and getting slaughtered. And I remember sitting on a wall just crying and like crying and crying. Being an artist, you put yourself on the line, don't you, a lot. I think that's one thing that even a 50-year-old now, I think sometimes critics, you get a real range of critics. Some of them, like Lynn Gardner or Libby Purvis, are wonderfully sensitive to, even when they're giving a negative review, they're very aware that you are a human being. And then, and they always, but then you get some other critics, naming none. Oh, I'd love to name some. That seem to be serving their ego and more than helping the reader or help being aware of the artist as a human being. You know, they're more just trying to, they write some really scathing reviews of people and really quite nasty and vicious. And you go, is that really the best way to go about being a theatre reviewer? So you put your neck on the line, don't you? But it reminds me of that poem about in the arena. I don't know if, do you know that, the arena one where?
Yeah, I don't know who it's by, but I've heard Brené Brown quote it. I think we're talking about the same one, but to paraphrase it, like it's the person in the arena, and like who's getting all the dust and I'm destroying the poem now, but all the dust and the mug and what they're the ones, not the one who's standing on the outside, just
the
not in the
cold
fight.
souls on the outside, standing on the outside going, oh, you're doing it wrong, you should do this, you should do that. That's the easy, anyone can do that on the outside and just judge it. But yes, the people in the arena with the sweat and the dirt and the blood that are taking the risk, they're the real heroes. Yeah, I think somebody's accredited it to Roosevelt, I think, one time, but I'm not sure whether it was Roosevelt or not. But I'm wanting to Google it now,
and we'll find out. Amazing.
Yeah.
And I want to
but whenever
ask
I
you
get
about,
a bad review, I always go back and read that.
Do you? Yeah. It still hurts, doesn't it? So I'd love to ask you about physical theatre, physical comedy. You've mentioned some of the performers that you used to watch when you were growing up, and also like the Gaulier training's really physical. What else do you think has helped you with that physicality? Because obviously there's so many different kinds of training, but like to be able to make the masks work in the way that you do, it does require a particular skill set. What's helped you be a physical comedian, do you think?
I think it helped when I was younger that I'd done a lot of sport. So I did a hell of a lot of sport. I didn't really want to be an actor or in theatre. I just wanted to be a sportsman. So I loved cricket and rugby and golf and tennis and football. I did everything for my school and played American football for Great Britain at under 19s. And
did you?
Went off to America and played for Great Britain under 19s against this team in Chicago.
That's
and ended up
so
on American.
Cool.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was brilliant. It was immense fun. And my local team in Northampton, we were British champions. And even though I was short, I was like 5'5". I was one of the shortest on the team, but I was the captain, and and I got selected for the Great Britain team. It was immense fun. And then I fractured my spine in a game and nearly ended up like Christopher Reeve, you know, the guy that played Superman, paralyzed from the neck down. My doctor said I was really lucky. If my head had been a bit lower, I'd have totally severed everything and been in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And after I got over the shock of that and I had to stop playing, that's when I really got into acting and theatre more and left the sport behind. But I think that, having done it for years, I think that gave me physical coordination and good balance. And so that helped with masks and clowning. And then John Wright was great. I learned a hell of a lot from him. I did so many of his workshops, and he'd do like 2 days in Kendal at a festival, and I'd go up and just stay in a B&B and do the 2 days with him. And then he'd do a week at the Battersea Arts Centre, and I'd go and do that with him. And I just kind of followed him around like a puppy dog for quite a long time, a couple of years, just trying to do as many workshops with him as possible, as well as training with him at Middlesex. And so he was a huge help. And then in the workshops, like watching other people, watching what works, watching what doesn't work. And then in every workshop writing down as many notes. I did a workshop with Clive Barker, the guy that wrote Theatre Games. I did a week with him. Went to the Desmond Jones School of Mime and Physical Theatre for 6 months and trained with him. I made sure that every lunchtime I wrote down everything as much as I can remember, and then in the evening, because I knew that if I didn't, I'd forget it in a day or two. And I think that helped. I think the main things I realized early on were work with really good people and write down what you're learning so that your learning curve is steeper, you get further quicker, and keep saying, get up, keep getting up, even though, when they go 2 volunteers, please, even when you're really nervous, just get up and try it. Try not to get up too much and not to piss off the other people in the workshop, but don't be too timid either, because you've got to get up and fail, and then have a success and then fail again. And then, so yeah, work with really good people, take lots of notes, and then just keep getting up and taking risks and think over time. And then really analyze and watch other people. Don't be in a bubble. Don't just sit there dwelling on what you did, but try and spot what they're doing. What are they doing with their feet? What are they doing with their hands? Why was that funny? And then practice at home sometimes.
I love that. And again, now you've mentioned the sports element as well. Like you do have like this extreme openness to training and improving, and you can see that, like, because it's probably usual to you, but I don't think everybody does. I think some people it peaks at a certain level and then they still have their career in productions, but you've had so many different inputs. You could have just done the Gaulier and not done the Desmond Jones or whatever. So I think that's really interesting. And I'd love to know, for where you are in your career right now, you've just had this really successful run. I've been seeing some of the reviews on Twitter, incredible reviews. For you, as you look forward, do you know what you want to be doing next, and how far can you see into the future in terms of things that you'd still love to take on as challenges? You might be like, no, I just need a nap. I'm quite tired after this brilliant run. So,
if you'd have asked me 3 days ago, definitely I just needed my bed for 3 days. I was exhausted because I directed it and I was in it. I had a small part and I was producing it. It was full on. And we were doing 8 shows a week. So it's funny because just before lockdown, I was diagnosed with bladder cancer. And I didn't know if it was going to be terminal or not. So that was very scary. So I was rushed in for emergency surgery and they cut it out and they found out that it was luckily low grade. They got it early, hadn't gone through the bladder wall into my lymph system, and that I potentially could have many decades of life instead of 2 or 3, which at one point it looked like I was going to. So, I mean, there's a 33% chance it will come back within 5 years. So I'm very aware that I've got a 1 in 3 chance. But then they said they'll cut it out again. But that's physically taken its toll on me. The operation and the chemo. Plus, I broke my ankle many years ago, and that didn't heal. The operation went wrong when they operated on it, so they had to reoperate on it. And I've been left with a kind of reduced movement and continual pain in my ankle. So talking about physical comedy, that's and then because of that, I had to stop playing football, Sunday league football, and so then I put on weight, and so these have a big impact on my physical performance, especially physical theatre and comedy. So I can't be as physically goofy and as wild. And so I'm trying to keep my weight down so that when I put different masks on, I can still transform and become different characters. Otherwise, all my characters are going to be overweight, little round, rotund characters. Do you know what I mean? Which is great. They can all be family members, but it's not ideal. So I'm trying to keep my weight down, trying to get healthy, trying to eat better. But it's made me think, I need to focus more on verbal humor as well now, not just physical. So it's and also the health scare and the recovery and the lockdown has just made me so grateful that I'm trying not to think too far ahead, and I'm just grateful for anything, and I'm just enjoying being alive and being creative. Having said that, my wife and I talk about different projects that we've got lined up. So we are writing a couple of new plays, and I want to devise a brand new mask physical theatre show that I've started mulling over. I got my masks out a couple of days ago after I'd had a big sleep after our show ended on Saturday, and got the masks out and started playing with them. And because it was like so refreshing because I've been playing a complete psychopath in Abby's play that beats up his girlfriend, and
Yeah.
he's a real horrible character. So it's so nice to put on these funny, goofy masks and think about doing comedy again. So yeah, I'm excited to create a new mask show. But I'm aware it's going to take time. I think that's the main thing I've learned now as well, is not to rush to putting stuff on in London, especially because you can get savaged by the critics, and you're up against like the Royal Court, the National Theatre, that these companies that have got immense resources and they can do weeks of R&D, and then they can try it out in this space for this amount of time. And sometimes when they eventually get their shows on in front of the critics, and they've been working on it for a year or two and really honed it, and we haven't got the financial resources or the space. So, but we still want to do quality work, not necessarily quantity. So we've got to just give ourselves permission to do more R&D and take our time, and so that when we put something in front of the audience, it's worth their while and it's worth their money and time, because I'm very aware that time and money is very precious in any country at any time, but even more in cost of living crisis. And so I want, when people come to the theatre, I want it to be as meaningful and nourishing as possible. So in order for that to happen, we've got to put the time and the effort in to make it as good as possible. And I think in the past I've rushed a bit, so I'm going to take my time.
I think that sounds incredibly wise. I feel like we've come full circle from the like micro slowdown in the scene to the slowdown in the bigger picture.
Oh, you're good. You're very good. Yeah, I did that. It was deliberate. Yeah.
I was like, ooh. But no, but that in all seriousness though, yeah, I mean, I just remember as well running a theatre company, and often for budgets, things would be, I find it so frustrating sometimes. Like it can be really fun at first to make a show in a week, to make a show in 3 weeks, to make a show in, it's like the exhilaration, and we pulled it off and nearly have a nervous breakdown, but we're okay. But there comes a point where it's just like you say, in terms of the quality, that it can be quite frustrating. And as you say, when there are so many other people can deploy more resources and have that developmental time, the same as we're hearing about it from all different angles with the writers' strike at the minute, how important the developmental time is for their different writers' rooms and those different inputs. So I think that's very wise. And I think it's extraordinary that even 3 days after your show, you've already got ideas percolating and got your masks out. That might be slow for you, but the rest of us might be feeling like slouches right now. So I tip my hat to you for sure.
Well, let's see. It might not come to fruition until 2025. Who knows?
Yeah, no, but that's brilliant. And thank you for sharing as generously as you have today. I've learned so much. So any parting advice to listeners who are fellow writers, creatives, comedy lovers who are doing their best to make work right now?
I think one of the best things I've learned now that in my 50 years on this planet, is I try and think to myself, what type of show would I like to sit and watch? It's very easy to go, oh, what do the critics want? Or what does this audience want? Or that audience or that venue? But actually, when I'm writing, creating now, I go, when I go to the theatre, what do I crave? What do I want to see? And so I'm always trying to put myself imagining myself in the audience watching my show, and how can I make it as entertaining as possible? And I suppose there was one other thing, and now it's just gone out of my mind. Oh, heck. I had another, what was it? It's gone.
Oh, that's okay. That's the fleeting nature of live conversations. But I love that as a sentiment. And I kind of make this podcast to be able to make the podcast that I want to listen to, that's quite nerdy about comedy and digs into all the questions. And I'm writing in fiction the things I want to. Has it come back to you?
It's come back to me. Thank you. You feel brilliant. Thank you. Yeah. When creating a show, when I was working in traditional rep and had a steady job, and I went freelance and set up my own theatre company and decided to produce my own work, and that's quite scary. And one of the best things that was ever said to me was, what's your USP? What is your unique selling point? Try and find out. Try to step outside yourself and see what have you got that will make, what's your unique selling point? And so for mine, it was combining masks and improv and then a bit of Shakespeare. I was like, nobody else is doing that. Improv plus masks plus Shakespeare. So that created a unique product that then there was a gap in the market that I found. And so I think that's quite useful. It's a horribly like business school talk, but I do think it's useful to think what is your USP as well, or what's the hook? What are you
Yeah.
offering the world?
I love that because we do like it is a business as well. If you want to survive, or if that's where you want to make your money financially, like I don't mind whether people do it for money or not. Like I don't care amateur professional, but if it is to support a career and all the things that go with that financially, it is a business too. And also the flip side of that, like I think it's fun to think of like that unique, like what's uniquely you, what can only you write, only you bring. That's awesome. I love it.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's views.
Yeah. So where should people go to find out more about you and your work?
My theatre company that I co-set up with Paul Jenkins 30 years ago is Kepow, Kepow, kepowtheatre.co.uk. I personally am on Twitter and Facebook. So showing my age because I'm not on Instagram and Snapchat, which my daughters in their 20s are. So
no worries.
Yeah, although I've been reading recently about Facebook and how their ethics, and I'm starting to question whether that is a good platform. It's lovely, brilliant for getting back in touch with people I haven't seen for ages, but I don't know. It's just I've been reading some articles by whistleblowers who've worked inside Facebook, and so I'm getting.
But so don't go and find Kevin on Facebook. Go find him on Twitter instead, and his website.
But what the hell is Elon Musk doing as well with Twitter? It's like, how do we communicate nowadays? It's like, oh my goodness.
Find Kevin, send a carrier pigeon to his house with a note that says, "You're awesome. Keep going."
Put my phone number up on the screen.
But great. But I'll put those. I will put the links to website and those things in the show notes so people can find you legitimately. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm getting darker and darker. The sun is
it's moody.
It's going to be a black screen in a minute. I'm going to be just a voice. Thank you. It's been immense fun talking to you.
Amazing.